Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today on leveraging Java platform innovations for your business. I'm Donald Smith, and with me today is George Saab. We'll do a bit of an introduction of ourselves here in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing I will note is that today's webinar is a little different. We're going to have some slides up just in the background, but the goal here is to be a little more podcast, a little less webinar. So you're welcome to follow along on the slides, or you're welcome to just push those in the background and just listen along. We would certainly welcome your feedback on if you like the format, if you'd like to see more discussions like this, or if you'd like to see more slides, more hands-on type content, please let us know. Make notes of any feedback you have, because we will certainly be asking you about that after the fact. So with that, we'll dive right in. So I'm Donald Smith. I run the product management team for the Java platform group at Oracle. So the team that I work with, we're responsible for the Oracle JDK and our work and participation in Open JDK. And with me today is George. George, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Donald. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm George Saab, Senior Vice President for the Java Platform Group at Oracle, and also Chair of the OpenJDK Governing Board.
Cool. All right. So what we want to talk about today is we're going to talk a little bit higher level in organizations. So we're going to look at development managers and teams that are making business decisions based on some of the technology innovations that's going on in the Java platform. So when we talk about this topic in particular, we like to highlight that when we're working with enterprises, we kind of see the applications that they're working on in one of three main states. So there's the modern app dev. So these are applications brand new out of the box, usually taking advantage of the latest and greatest of things going on. On the other extreme, you have applications that may be in production or have been in production for a very long time, sometimes even decades. And these applications, a lot of enterprises, when they get them up and running, they don't want to touch them. They just want to leave them running as long as possible. They want stability, security, and performance updates. But ideally, they're not doing a whole lot to them other than just leveraging the fact that it runs and it runs well. And then, of course, we have the middle ground, where we have organizations that have applications in production where they're trying to modernize those in some way. So it's not the brand new stuff, but it's trying to move some of the older stuff forward, right? So those are kind of the three main buckets that we see when we're looking at applications. And again, everybody here is looking for security, stability, and performance updates at the end of the day. George, I know you've just done quite a bit of traveling and hit a number of enterprise customers along the way. What are you seeing in terms of key trends?
Yeah, Donald, I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head there. What we see with people who are using Java today is really all three of these, and sometimes all three within the same organization. So the Java platform being something that's been around for a number of decades now, there is a substantial amount of code out there. There are a substantial number of workloads that people run, and many of those are in this sort of maintenance bucket where they just want them to keep running. Of course, they're attuned to the fact that those need to be kept secure. They often look for places where there are opportunities for them to take advantage of newer hardware in order to save money. But really those are just things that they want to have super rock solid and stable. At the other end of the spectrum, there's completely new things that are being written in many cases from scratch, and they're doing that because there are places where they want to take advantage of new things that are out there, whether it be technologies that are kind of underlying the workload that they're writing, or new trends in architecture, or new advances, for instance, in the Java platform itself. And then, of course, there are things in the middle where, there's something that's been around for a while. It's under very active use. So they want to be able to modernize without interrupting service. And I think one of the nice things and where we've come in the way that we're delivering Java today is that we have a model that allows us to offer things to all three of these areas.
Excellent. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, so, one of the things that has kept Java going for going on 30 years is trust, right? So, number one is trust that you're going to be able to get platform updates for a very long time. When you're looking to put a platform or an application into production, usually you're hoping that it's going to run for decades or a very long time. So you want to make sure that all your underlying infrastructure is going to be supported and secure and stable for that very long time. And so we take a lot of pride on our history on delivering on that. One of the things that's interesting here is, as you know, Java has made quite a pivot over the last 5 years from, a major release every 3 or 4 or even 5 years to a new release cadence, 6 month releases with an LTS model. And I keep hearing more and more from enterprises and people that I'm talking to about just how powerful that transition has become, and how well respected and well liked it's turned out to be. It took a couple of years to make that pivot, and I know people had questions about it up front, but I think we've really come a long way. I'd love it if you could kind of share your experience and what you're hearing in your conversations with respect to that.
Yeah, that it's really interesting area, Donald. When we got started in sort of looking at possibly making reforms to the way that we deliver Java, we went out and talked with a bunch of folks. And one of the questions that we asked was, well, hey, is it more important that there be a lot of rapid innovation happening in the platform that lets you take advantage of new trends in the industry and new technologies? Or is it more important for you to have, rock solid stability and know that, new things that are coming along are not causing risk for you? And, you can kind of imagine what the response was, which was, yes, we want both. We want both of those things. We don't want one or the other. And so, that left us, sort of scratching our heads and kind of going up to the drawing board and trying to figure out, was there a way of doing that? And so this is, I think one of the things that's been really exciting for us is that we feel that with the model that we have now, where we have, a sort of rapid releases that are coming out with the newest technologies, but also the very, long-term commitment to the long-term support or LTS releases that you mentioned, we're kind of giving people the best of both worlds. They can, choose where on that spectrum they want to be, not only overall for their organization, but for particular workloads or particular applications they're working on. They no longer, kind of have to choose between one or the other or have that choice made for them. And so that's something that people have responded to, I think, really, really positively.
Excellent. Now, I understand you had a meeting with the JCP Executive Committee recently, and I think you guys spoke a little bit, maybe a bit of a retrospective on the LTS transition. Was there anything interesting came out of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the Java Community Process Executive Committee, is kind of comprised of representatives from a number of organizations around the industry who have kind of a long-term interest in Java evolution, either because they're helping to contribute to it, or because they are consumers of it. And what was interesting here was, this is sort of a regular dialogue that we have. And the sort of overall observation was that when we proposed this change in the distribution model, with the introduction of the rapid releases and the 6-month cadence, people were kind of skeptical, and rightly so. You can understand when there's something new that's coming along, you want to, especially enterprises want to wait and kind of see how it pans out. And so there was sort of a general reaction of, well, Oracle says they're going to do this. Let's see what happens. And so it was quite nice in this recent meeting with the executive committee that we did this sort of retrospective and look back at how's it gone since then. And basically, everyone was of the opinion that this new model has worked out really nicely for enterprises, for developers, and for people who are making libraries or frameworks or other things that are used in the industry. People now, I think, have a much better understanding of what to expect from the rapid cadence releases, and the understanding that each one of these, while they're around for 6 months until the next one comes along, they are production quality, and you can use them, and the investment in supporting them or adopting them for particular kinds of workloads can absolutely be worth it, if you're fast moving and want to take advantage of the best performance and security and the newest features. This is a great way to go. And what we've seen is library and framework developers who initially were a little bit hesitant or kind of wondered whether they wanted to jump on that train, have now been doing that much more aggressively, and basically supporting new 6-month releases as they come out, and especially doing that in preparation for knowing that when the next long-term support release rolls around, they're going to be there, and their library is going to be able to be used. And that in turn means that people who are writing applications can be prepared to move forward and take advantage of those more quickly for the workloads where that makes sense. So in other words, the review with the executive committee, and the minutes are online, by the way, were, hey, this is super positive. An interesting anecdote there is that, from the people on my team who work on the evolution and newest releases, along with their colleagues kind of around the industry who help contribute and make those possible, is that none of them would like to go back to the old model. Like, all of them feel that it's been just a great improvement in their ability to make the platform evolve more quickly, and get new features out, and in the hands of people who want them, while not putting those into old releases where people are not looking for those features, they just want the stability.
Yeah, and you make a good point about not wanting to go back, because I think that's kind of the sign that it was a good transition. It was worth the effort to make that transition. I think back to many years ago. Let's go back to, say, Java 1.4 and Java 5 and 6. I remember working at tool vendors at the time, and when a new version of Java, a new major version, came out, it was basically an all hands on deck moment for any tool vendor, library provider, stack creator. It was basically everybody in the company had to drop everything and spend months and maybe even a year doing a transition to that new major release, right? And that just became ingrained in a lot of application development, and especially with tool vendors and library providers. It just became a thing where, oh gosh, it would be great if Java was delayed a year so we could do this other thing. And then when it comes out, Java 7 or even Java 8, still, it was like, you had to kind of drop everything and focus to migrate to whatever the latest and greatest platform innovation was at the time. And what we saw is the transition, I think, between 8 and 11, in particular, we saw organizations go, hey, wait a second, we don't have to do that anymore. It's now continuous innovation. It's now continuous development. So rather than taking a team of 10 and going all in once every couple of years, we can now have a team of 1 or 2 people that are keeping up on the 6-month release cadence and delivering in a much more natural, modern way. And so what I think we've seen is we're well past that transition where most successful libraries and middleware and frameworks are now set up for that and used to that. And yeah, it's like there's no going back. And so I'm just really glad that it's all worked out. So,
Yeah,
okay.
no,
And
I agree. I mean, I think that, often, however much enterprises may want to move and try out a new version, they can sometimes be held back by the tool or library dependencies that they have. But a nice thing we're seeing now is that, those tool vendors are really jumping on this early so that, many of the new 6-month releases already have support from tool vendors the day they come out, or even before. And, the same is starting to be true on the library and framework side. And so I think that's, enabled in part because of the style of development that we've been doing on the Java platform, even aside from the rapid release cadence. And so just a couple of things I'd cite there is, many of the features that we work on are sort of done in projects on the side that can produce their own early access builds so that somebody's really passionate about a particular area. Say one of the projects is listed on this slide, like Loom or Panama, can go and pick up early access builds, try them out, and give feedback before they even come into the mainline of Java development. And then once they do come into the mainline, we have early access builds on roughly a weekly or biweekly cadence, and have had that all along. That basically means that if you're interested in seeing how this feature looks when it comes into the next version of Java, you can try it out often months before that rapid release comes out. And then the final thing is, the addition of things like preview features so that, when we're introducing a new feature, when we think it's final, when we think it's production quality, it's fully specified, it's fully tested. In the old model, we would have, declared that it was done. We still have the ability now to deliver those as a preview feature so that you can effectively say the feature's there, but the concrete has not been poured. And that gives people the option to try those features out, and really try them out in anger because they're in the mainline releases of Java that people are downloading and trying. They don't have to go through any extra effort aside from turning on preview features, trying them out, and giving us feedback. And what we've seen is that the feedback we've gotten from that has made it so that the final versions of these features are much more well-rounded, much smoother, much more intuitive and easier to understand. And we don't have the kind of rough edges that we may have seen in the past. So that's something that has been a huge boon, I think, to the way that these features look in Java going forward. And above all, this is valuable for us because what we're trying to do as we add features to Java going forward is make sure that those features really feel like an integrated natural part of Java, not just some weird feature bolted on the side in order to tick off a checkbox. Because we've seen that kind of approach and what that leads to, and it really tends to be kind of a mess. Not only in terms of what's there, but also in terms of the possibilities that you have going forward. So that's something that the people who are working on the evolution of Java really, really take very seriously and think about hard, before we add something.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the new cadence, I think preview features was something that I had personally underestimated the value of. Especially to those managing a project, and even if you're developing at the tip and you have a brand new application, you're using the latest version, you have some sort of development time frame where things are still going to transition on you through the development. And so it's just nice to know that the tooling is going to be able to keep up with you when you get there, right? And so Project Amber in particular is a great place where, in particular, I'll pick on IDE vendors since I have some experience in that space, where it used to be when there was an innovation in the language itself, the IDEs would lag a little bit. It would take a little bit of time. Sometimes a new version of Java would come out, and it would be 3 or 4 months before the tooling was GA and ready to go in production. And with the preview features, thankfully, and kind of that transition of that model, we don't see that, which is super helpful right up to the C-suite. But that being said, I have a slide up here for those that may be following. These are the pillars of innovation. There's more, but these are the ones we talk about a fair bit when we're speaking about Java. I'll tell you, Loom is coming, and it's targeted for Java 21 this September. I don't know if I can overstate the excitement and how keen people are to get Loom into the platform. I don't want to oversell it, but I think this is as big, if not bigger, than generics was in terms of how it's going to change application development. It's just people are excited over it. And I think at the simplest level, you could go, oh, maybe I can more easily take advantage of my underlying hardware and therefore have lower hardware costs. But it's like there is just so much more coming with Loom. So maybe George, I know you keep getting asked about this. I understand, especially C-level executives really are excited about this and ask you about it a lot. Can you maybe just spend a couple minutes for those listening in, and maybe those listening in that aren't full-time Java developers, just tell us a little bit about Loom and why the C-levels are asking you about it so much and what's exciting about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Project Loom is exactly, an example of the kind of thing I was just mentioning, right? Where, basically what's happening is, Java for many, many years has had a great reputation for very good and solid scalability. And that's built in part on, a Java thread being mapped one-to-one to a native platform thread. And so, that has worked well. But that basically means that if you run out of native platform threads, then you can't continue to scale better than that. So what has happened over the past many years in the industry and in the Java ecosystem is that an architectural approach has been tried where basically you have asynchronous or reactive programming that it inverts control and basically makes it so that you are able to scale above the limits of native platform threads, but at a cost. And that cost is complexity in your application and your programming model. So basically, what tends to happen is, you try it in a particular area that you think is sensitive to this, and that you think needs to scale beyond what the native platform allowed previously. And it ends up, that whole style of programming ends up taking over your entire application. And so you can achieve great scalability gains that way. But what ends up happening is all of your code ends up being very complex, hard to understand, hard to reason about what's going on, harder to maintain, and doesn't necessarily integrate well with a lot of the tools that are out there in terms of really understanding what's going on in your application at runtime. So what Loom and virtual threads does is basically makes a change so that the Java runtime is able to create virtual threads where you have, thousands or even tens of thousands of these virtual threads per native platform thread. And so what that means is that you're now able to scale your Java application far beyond the limits of the native platform threads. And the Java runtime does the heavy lifting of making sure that everything that needs to happen in order to make that possible is happening. And so, basically, again, that means that your applications that are written in traditional, simpler to understand, simpler to maintain, synchronous style are now able to scale beyond the limits of the number of native platform threads that you have. And so for particular kinds of applications, especially ones that have, for instance, a lot of transactions, a lot of I/O, not so much ones that are CPU bound, but ones that are I/O bound, can now scale to great heights without having to resort to changing the programming model and architecture, and in a way that actually just integrates really, really smoothly with all of the existing tools that are out there for observability and maintenance. And so, again, this is sort of an interesting change. It's, one that has taken quite a while because we needed to, redo much of the plumbing of the Java platform and libraries themselves. And some of that was delivered gradually over the course of a number of the 6-month releases, especially, for instance, the changes in the libraries where they make native calls in order to be prepared for that. But once it has been added in, it's been in 2 rounds of previews now and is becoming a standard feature in Java 21. This is something that mostly doesn't require a whole bunch of change on the part of Java applications in order to take advantage of it, because the APIs for virtual threads and traditional platform threads are almost the same. So and in addition, this is the kind of thing that most applications don't necessarily consume directly, but consume through some kind of framework. So in the past, for instance, they may have been using a Java EE server or something similar, that had thread pooling facilities. And basically an update to those thread pools in order to not do pooling, but actually just hand out a new virtual thread every time they're asked for a thread, can often be sufficient for those platforms to be able to take advantage of the capabilities that Loom brings. And so for many applications and Java developers out there, they're going to see this update and this improvement without having to do a whole bunch of changes themselves, aside from moving to JDK 21.
Yeah, it's just so rare you get a feature like this that comes along where you get massive benefit and not necessarily have to do a bunch of work, like a bunch of underlying code change.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think, that really is kind of a testament to the sort of development and evolution philosophy that, the architects on my team have been taking towards how we're moving the platform forward. I can tell you that, the first 2 or 3, designs and prototypes that we had for virtual threads would not have been this simple to adopt. But, basically, they took the time to go back and think through, how can we make it simple? How can we make the transition easy? How can we make it, as intuitive as possible for, people for this new facility to be brought to light, but still feel like a just natural part of the Java platform. And so, that's one of the things that, made it take longer, but we think that ultimately that's going to lead to faster adoption and a lot more satisfaction on the part of everyone who's using it.
right. Yeah, and it's not only the Loom project itself, but the Java API, the Java libraries themselves taking advantage of that I think is kind of the 1-2 punch. So
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk about more of these, but I think in the interest of time, we should move on. So all the things we've just been talking about, we work on in OpenJDK. Oracle are the steward of OpenJDK. We drive most of the innovation going on in OpenJDK. We have our 6-month release cadence driven out of OpenJDK. But again, if we're talking kind of at the business level, why do business people care about this at the end of the day? Like, why should our customers care about the work we're doing in OpenJDK and the work we're doing in all the other community groups that we're very proud of and work with?
Yeah, I think that there are really, a couple of reasons. I think, one of the main reasons is, transparency. Developers who are at enterprises who are interested in understanding where the technology is headed, how it's going to affect them, and the applications that they work on, can basically get unprecedented insight into the development decisions as they're being made on the platform that they're relying upon. So, they can go to the OpenJDK community, they can join the mailing list, or even just go and look at archives and understand for particular features, why were they designed this way? Gosh, it looks like, it could have been done this other way. I wonder if they thought about that. And, usually it has been thought about and it's been discussed. And, there are good reasons for why it's the way that it is rather than some other way. And, in the past and on other platforms, that kind of insight might just not have been possible, right? The kind of access to, to those discussions and those decisions, and not just design decisions, but even, to the level of code reviews being done and, the comments on code reviews can really give Java developers great insight into the kinds of concerns that the people who are stewarding the evolution of their platform, go through and think about, as they're adding new capabilities to the language. And then I think, the other thing that's interesting, of course, about OpenJDK is, the code base is there that's being worked on. You can see every change as it's happening, as it goes in, and, basically follow along with the tip of development. And then based off that code base, there are a lot of alternatives, a lot of different organizations that are taking and making builds and providing those, as well as, an entire industry of folks that are not just making a build that's like, hey, I'm just taking the code that's there and built it, but actually, organizations like Oracle that are providing commercial support for people who want to know that, the builds that they're using are ones that are made by a professional organization who, is taking great care in how they're doing that, making sure that, all of the fixes that are necessary for a particular version are included and well tested, and providing professional commercial support for them as well, so that if an issue comes along, they're not going to be just going to a bunch of open source and like trying to figure out how to fix it themselves, but that they're actually they'll have someone who will stand behind it and help them figure out the right fixes. And so, as I said, there's a lot of choice there, which I think a lot of people value. And of course, Oracle is one of the choices, coming from my team, who are the ones who made most of this in the first place. And so, at least as I see it, are eminently well qualified to be able to make those fixes and changes.
Excellent. All right. Well, so we'll probably move to Q&A here in a minute, but just before we do that, I did just want to talk a little bit about some of the commercial value add, right? Because we've talked about innovations in the platform and how all the things that we just talked about take place in OpenJDK and through the JCP and some of the other community groups that we work in. But we know in particular there's some enterprises have needs that go beyond that, and we have some commercial features there. There's three in particular I think we want to talk about today. So there's the Enterprise Performance Pack, Graalvm Enterprise, and then management tools, but in particular JMS, the Java Management Service. So when you were traveling around recently, what were customers asking you about in terms of those three things that I just highlighted there? Do you want to expand on those a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is, these are offerings that, as you mentioned, are part of the Java SE Universal subscription. So, these are not things that you can, just go to an open community and find. They're things that are provided by us as a commercial support vendor. And so to go through those in order, the subscription Enterprise Performance Pack is basically a drop-in replacement for your JDK 8 implementation that brings you the performance and some of the functionality from Java 17 level, or the JDK 17 level. Both things like advances to garbage collection, like ZGC, and advances to the G1 garbage collector, but also, just raw performance improvements, again, without your needing to make substantial changes to your application in order to move them up to Java 17. So for particular enterprises and workloads, this can be a great way for you to kind of breathe new life into a workload that you've had, and make it possible for you to make choices of either having the performance improve or, in fact, reduce the amount of resources that are necessary in order to continue running and keeping that production workload going. Or even give you new options as you're looking at things like moving to the cloud, perhaps taking advantage of new hardware or other things like that. Let's see, you mentioned also Graalvm Enterprise, which is a suite of tools which allow you to have, for particular workloads, better JIT performance, and even be able to do native compilation. This is very popular for things like microservice architectures, and definitely something to try out, and see what kind of benefit it can give for your application. And then finally, the management tools, the I think main one to mention here is the Java Management Service, which is a cloud native service that itself runs on the Oracle Cloud, but basically which you can use in order to have observability of your workloads that are running on premise, on Oracle Cloud, or even on third-party clouds. And so, this is something that can give you insight into where you're running Java, what version of Java you're running, what kind of dependencies it has, whether it's keeping up with the security baseline, or even things that are happening going forward that may affect you, like certificate expiration or crypto algorithm, keeping up with the ones that are best to use at this point. So this I think is something that we've had many of the customers of the Java Universal subscription be really excited about and deploy just on a global scale. And here again, this is the kind of tool that you would expect to come from the people who have made Java with an eye towards its design, not only how it exists today, but also where it's headed out into the future, and help you prepare for that.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, so appreciate an update on those. And for those that are looking for more information, we do have webinars fairly recently on each of those topics. So you should be able to find those if anybody's looking for those through the Oracle content systems. Thank you, everyone. I hope you found this format useful. Please do send us your feedback. We definitely want to know if we should do more presentations in this style or not. Also, feel free to follow up and learn more about any of the features that are referred to today. As I mentioned earlier, we do have webinars on a lot of other content that goes into more depth. Feel free to look into that. Thank you, George, again for joining me, and cheers, everyone.